At the wedding, my daughter told the guard, "She's not invited," and the guard blocked me, her own mother. My name is Margaret Stone. I'm 67 years old, a widow who spent 43 years stitching other people's dreams while my own unravelled thread by thread. When my husband died in that terrible accident, leaving me with 6-year-old Melissa, I made a promise at his graveside. I whispered through tears, "I'll give her everything we couldn't have together." And I kept that promise. For 4 decades, I worked as a seamstress in Mrs. Henderson's alterations shop. My fingers cracked from pushing needles through wedding gowns, prom dresses, and business suits. Every morning, I'd wrap Band-Aids around my fingertips just so I could keep working. The bleeding never stopped, but neither did I. When Melissa turned 8, she saw the private academy across town with its pristine uniforms and manicured lawns. "Mama, why can't I go to the pretty school?" That pretty school cost $350 every month, my entire grocery budget. But I enrolled her anyway, surviving on peanut butter sandwiches and instant noodles while she ate cafeteria lunches with children whose parents drove Mercedes. At 16, Melissa needed SAT prep classes. The tutor wanted $80 per session. I sold my wedding ring, the only thing left of my husband, to a pawn shop for $240. 3 sessions. That ring had never left my finger for 18 years of marriage, but it left for her future. When she got accepted to law school, the celebration lasted exactly 1 night. The next morning, reality hit, $45,000 per year. I was already working 6 days a week at the shop, but I found a night cleaning job at the downtown office complex. From 9 p.m. to 2 a.m., I scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans, my knees screaming against cold tiles. Some nights I'd fall asleep standing up, mop in hand, but I never complained. Not once, because every sacrifice carved her path to success. Last month, Melissa called with news that made my heart sore. "Mum, I'm getting married. Richard proposed." Richard Morrison, a successful business attorney with political connections. Everything I'd dreamed for my daughter. "When?" I asked, already mentally designing her dress. 2 weeks from Saturday. It'll be small, Mum. Intimate. But don't worry, you'll be there. I spent those 2 weeks hand-sewing the most elegant navy dress I'd ever created. French seams, pearl buttons, delicate lace trim. I wanted to look worthy of standing beside my daughter on her special day. The wedding was at the Morrison family estate. Sprawling gardens, marble fountains, everything gleaming with old money. I arrived early, clutching a gift I'd wrapped in silver paper, antique earrings that belonged to my mother. The security guard at the entrance looked professional in his black suit and earpiece. I approached with a smile. "Good afternoon. I'm Margaret Stone, mother of the bride." He consulted his clipboard, running his finger down the list once, twice, 3 times. His expression shifted from professional to uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I don't see your name here." My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. I'm Melissa's mother. "Let me radio inside." He pressed his earpiece. "We have a situation at the gate. Lady claims to be mother of the bride, but she's not on the list." Minutes crawled by. Guests in designer clothes walked past me, their invitations checked and approved instantly. I stood there, sweating in my handmade dress, clutching my gift like a lifeline. Then I saw her. Melissa appeared at the gate in a breathtaking white gown I'd never seen before. No sweetheart neckline, I would have suggested. No delicate sleeves, I would have added. Someone else had chosen her dress. "Mum?" Her voice carried surprise, not joy. "Sweetheart, there seems to be some confusion. The guard says she's not invited." The words hit me like ice water. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Nearby guests stopped their conversations, phones subtly turning toward us. "I'm sorry, what?" Melissa's eyes, once warm with love, now held the coldness of winter steel. "She's not invited. This is a private affair." The same hands that once braided her hair, that bandaged her scraped knees, that signed countless permission slips, began trembling. The gift slipped from my fingers, landing on the concrete with a hollow thud. "Melissa, I'm your mother. And this is my wedding, my choice." The guard stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." 130 wedding guests watched as security escorted me away from my own daughter's wedding. I heard whispers, saw camera phones, felt every step like walking through broken glass. Have you ever been rejected by someone you gave everything to? Drop a heart if you understand that pain. That night, I sat in my empty kitchen, still wearing the navy dress I'd sewn with such hope. The silence felt deafening after 43 years of living for someone else's dreams. I kept replaying Melissa's childhood, searching for signs I'd missed, moments where love turned into entitlement. When she was 12, I remember her coming home from school, tears streaming down her face. "Jenny Morrison has a pool party, but I don't have a swimsuit like the other girls." The cheapest decent swimsuit cost $35. I had $12 in my wallet, and 3 days until payday. That evening, I walked to the plasma donation center downtown. The needle felt like fire in my arm, but 40 minutes later I walked out with $40. Melissa got her swimsuit. She never knew what it cost me. At 15, she wanted to attend summer debate camp at the state university. "Mum, this could get me into a top law school." The fee was $800. I didn't have $800. I didn't have $80. So I worked. Every weekend for 2 months, I cleaned houses in the wealthy neighborhoods where Melissa's classmates lived. I scrubbed the same marble countertops in kitchens bigger than our entire apartment. My knees turned purple from crawling across tile floors, my hands raw from bleach and ammonia. One Saturday, I was cleaning the Morrison family's guest bathroom when I heard familiar voices. Melissa was there for a study session with Richard's younger sister. Through the heating vent, I heard her laugh. "My mum's so embarrassing. She acts like we're still poor." I stopped scrubbing. Soap suds dripped from my gloves onto the imported Italian tile. "At least she cares," Richard's sister replied. "Sometimes I wish she'd just stop trying so hard." I finished cleaning that bathroom in silence, my reflection in their gold-framed mirror showing a woman I barely recognized. Grey-streaked hair, permanent worry lines, calloused hands that looked decades older than my 52 years. But I earned that $800. Melissa went to debate camp. She won 3rd place in the state competition. During her junior year of law school, she called me crying. "Mum, I can't afford my bar exam prep course. It's $2,300, and without it I might not pass." I was 59 then, my body already screaming from decades of manual labour. But I found a 3rd job, weekend catering for wedding receptions, carrying heavy trays, standing for 12-hour shifts, serving cake to brides whose dresses I'd probably altered during the week. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was working weddings to pay for my daughter's education, never imagining I'd be banned from her own. One reception, a bride's mother grabbed my arm as I cleared dessert plates. "You look exhausted, dear. Are you all right?" I smiled, as I always did. "Just tired. Long week." "Well, I hope someone takes care of you the way you're clearly taking care of others." If only she knew I was taking care of someone who was learning to be ashamed of me. The hardest sacrifice came during Melissa's final semester. She needed a laptop for her thesis research. Not just any laptop, a top-of-the-line model for $1,400. I had been saving for cataract surgery. My vision was getting worse, making sewing increasingly difficult. Mrs. Henderson had noticed my mistakes, the crooked hems, the missed stitches. I was scared of losing my job. But Melissa needed that laptop more than I needed to see clearly. I used my surgery fund. My world stayed blurry, but her future came into sharp focus. After graduation, she landed her job at Morrison Associates. Richard had recommended her, she said. She moved into a downtown apartment with granite countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. I was so proud. She invited me over exactly once. I brought homemade cookies and wore my nicest dress, the same navy one I'd eventually wear to her wedding gate. "Mum, you can't park that old car in the visitor's spot. It makes the building look bad." My 1998 Honda Civic, held together with prayer and duct tape, suddenly felt like a scarlet letter. Where should I park then? Maybe just take the bus next time. That was 3 years ago. She called occasionally, always when she needed something. Money for a security deposit, help with her student loan payments, a co-signer for her car loan. I said yes every time, because that's what mothers do. We give until there's nothing left, then we find a way to give more. Standing at that wedding gate, watching my daughter's cold eyes, I finally understood the truth. My sacrifices hadn't built a bridge between us. They had built a pedestal that lifted her so high she couldn't see me anymore. 43 years of bleeding fingers, sleepless nights and swallowed pride had created someone who saw my love as weakness and my presence as embarrassment. That night, for the first time in decades, I cried for myself instead of for her. 3 weeks after the wedding humiliation, I was starting to find some peace. I'd joined a grief support group at the community centre, finally admitting that I was mourning the loss of my daughter, not to death, but to indifference. That Tuesday morning changed everything. The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m. Through my peephole, I saw Melissa standing on my porch, but she wasn't alone. Richard towered beside her in his expensive charcoal suit, and behind them stood a man I didn't recognise, carrying a leather briefcase. My heart jumped. Maybe she'd come to apologise. Maybe the wedding rejection was just pre-wedding stress, and now she wanted to make things right. I opened the door with cautious hope. "Mum." Melissa's voice was clinical, professional. She wore a burgundy power suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "We need to talk." They entered without invitation. The stranger set his briefcase on my worn kitchen table with the kind of authority that made my stomach clench. "Margaret Stone?" The man extended his hand. "I'm attorney James Caldwell from Morrison Associates. I represent your daughter and son-in-law." The formal introduction felt like a slap. Melissa couldn't even speak for herself anymore. Richard positioned himself by the window, arms crossed, surveying my modest 2-bedroom home like a real estate appraiser. His eyes lingered on the water stain on my ceiling, the outdated appliances, the furniture I'd bought second-hand decades ago. "Please sit," I gestured toward my small dining set. Caldwell opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Mrs. Stone, we're here to discuss your future welfare and security." "My what?" Melissa finally spoke, her voice carrying that patronising tone she'd perfected in law school. "Mum, you're getting older. This house is becoming too much for you to maintain." I looked around my home, the place I'd worked 16-hour days to afford, where I'd raised my daughter, where every corner held memories of homework sessions and birthday celebrations. "I manage just fine." Richard's laugh was sharp. "Margaret, look around, the roof leaks. The kitchen is from 1985. You're living in the past." Caldwell slid documents across my table. "We've prepared a property transfer that would put the house in Melissa's name. This way she can handle major repairs, property taxes, and eventually, when you need assisted living, the proceeds can fund your care." The words hit me like ice water. Assisted living? "It's practical planning," Melissa said, not meeting my eyes. "You'll have security knowing I'm managing your assets responsibly." I picked up the papers. Legal jargon filled the pages, but one phrase jumped out. "Transfer of deed, full ownership rights to Melissa Stone Morrison." "You want me to give you my house?" "We want to help you," Richard corrected, his voice dripping with false concern. "Property management is complex. Market fluctuations, tax implications. It's better handled by someone with legal expertise." Melissa leaned forward. "Mum, don't be stubborn about this. It's what's best for everyone." My hands trembled as I set the papers down. "This house is all I have, which is exactly why you need proper management." Caldwell's pen clicked repeatedly, a sound that felt like nails on a chalkboard. "Mrs. Stone, at your age, cognitive decline becomes a concern. Better to make these decisions now while you're still capable." The insult hit me like a physical blow. There's nothing wrong with my mind. Of course not. Melissa's voice carried that same fake sweetness she'd used as a teenager when she wanted something. But accidents happen. What if you fall? What if you forget to pay taxes? The state could take everything. Richard moved closer, his shadow falling across my table. We're offering protection, Margaret. Don't mistake generosity for manipulation. I stared at my daughter. This woman I'd sacrificed everything to create. Her manicured nails tapped impatiently against my tablecloth, the same tablecloth where she'd done countless homework assignments while I worked late into the night. What if I say no? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Melissa's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Mum, don't be selfish. You've had your turn at independence. Now it's time to think about what's practical. Selfish? The word escaped me like a gasp. After everything I've done. Everything you chose to do, Melissa cut me off. Nobody asked you to work 3 jobs or sell your jewellery. Those were your choices. The cruelty of it stole my breath. 43 years of sacrifice reduced to choices nobody asked for. Caldwell cleared his throat. Mrs. Stone, I should mention that your daughter is prepared to ensure your comfort regardless of your decision here, but without proper legal protections in place. He let the threat hang in the air. What does that mean? Richard's smile never reached his eyes. It means, Margaret, that elder care can be expensive. Very expensive. And if something were to happen to you, medically, financially, well, the state has its own ideas about how to handle these situations. The threat was crystal clear. Sign over my house or they'd find other ways to control my life. I looked at Melissa one more time, searching for any trace of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd told me I was her hero, who'd promised to take care of me when I got old. That little girl was gone. In her place sat a stranger wearing my daughter's face. I need time to think. Melissa's jaw tightened. How much time? More than this moment. Caldwell packed his papers with sharp, irritated movements. Mrs. Stone, this offer won't remain open indefinitely. There are other options for handling these matters if family cooperation isn't possible. What other options? The silence stretched like a wire ready to snap. Finally, Melissa stood. Mum, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Do you really want to end up in a state-run nursing home? The question hung in the air like smoke after a fire. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table for hours, staring at the water stain on my ceiling. That stain had been there for 2 years. I'd been saving up to fix it, putting aside $10 here and there from my Social Security check. Now I wondered if I'd ever get the chance. When family uses your love against you, it breaks something inside. Comment betrayed if you felt this. 2 months passed in tense silence. I refused to sign the property transfer, despite daily calls from Caldwell's office. Each morning brought a new legal document slipped under my door, notices about elder protection services and cognitive assessments. I started documenting everything, every phone call, every legal paper, every threat disguised as concern. My dining room table became a war room covered with files and notebooks. Then came the Tuesday that shattered my world completely. I was at the grocery store, carefully counting coupons to stretch my Social Security check, when my debit card was declined. The cashier looked at me with pity as I fumbled for cash to pay for my modest cart of generic brands and sale items. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The machine says insufficient funds." Impossible. I had $42,000 in that account, my entire life savings, accumulated through decades of discipline and sacrifice. I rushed to the bank, my hands shaking as I approached the teller window. I need to check my account balance. There must be some mistake. The young teller's face went pale as she looked at her screen. "Mrs. Stone, your savings account shows a balance of $47.82. The blood drained from my face. That's impossible. I had over $40,000. She turned her monitor toward me. Transaction after transaction showed withdrawals, all authorized with my social security number and account information. Ma'am, these withdrawals were all properly authorized. They show electronic signatures matching our records. My vision blurred as I scanned the dates. The withdrawals had started the day after I refused to sign the property transfer. Who authorized these? The teller hesitated. The account shows Melissa Stone Morrison as an authorized user. She was added 3 years ago when you co-signed her car loan. 3 years ago. When Melissa had sweet-talked me into adding her to my account, just in case of emergencies. I'd thought it meant she could help me pay bills if I got sick. Instead, she'd emptied my future. I stumbled out of the bank and drove straight to Morrison Associates. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I pushed past her into Melissa's corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and mahogany furniture. Melissa looked up from her computer, her face showing no surprise at my arrival. "Mum, I wondered when you'd figure it out." "You stole from me." My voice came out as a whisper. $42,000, my entire life savings. She leaned back in her leather chair, completely calm. "I didn't steal anything. I'm an authorized user on your account. Everything I did was legal." Richard appeared in the doorway, alerted by my raised voice. Behind him, other lawyers gathered, drawn by the commotion. "You took my medical fund, my funeral money, everything I saved for emergencies." Melissa's voice carried across the office, loud enough for her colleagues to hear. "You should be thanking me. That money is better invested in my future than wasted on your old age." The cruelty of her words, spoken so publicly, hit me like a physical slap. Her co-workers shifted uncomfortably, some pulling out phones to record the spectacle. "How could you do this to me?" "Easily." Her smile was ice cold. "You made yourself vulnerable the moment you added me to that account. Did you really think I'd let you sit on all that money while you played the martyr?" Richard stepped forward. "Margaret, you're causing a scene. I suggest you leave before we call security." "This is my daughter." "This is a law firm." Richard's voice was sharp. "And you're trespassing." I turned to the gathering crowd of lawyers and paralegals. "She stole my life savings. My own daughter robbed me blind." Melissa stood, straightening her jacket. "What I did was fiscally responsible. You were never going to use that money anyway. You hoard cash like some Depression-era relic while living in squalor." The office fell silent. Even the lawyers looked uncomfortable with her coldness. "I raised you better than this. You raised me to be strong, to take what I need and not apologize for it." Her voice carried across the marble lobby. "You taught me that weakness gets you nothing. Well, congratulations. I learned." Security arrived then. 2 guards in uniform who looked at me with the same pity I'd seen at the grocery store. "Ma'am, we need you to leave the premises." As they escorted me out, I heard Melissa's voice behind me, addressing her colleagues. "I'm sorry you had to witness that. Dementia can make family members paranoid and aggressive." Dementia. She was already building her narrative. That night I collapsed in my kitchen from the stress. The walls felt like they were closing in, my chest tight with panic and betrayal. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process how my own child had become my predator. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with an IV in my arm and a doctor leaning over me. "Mrs. Stone, you've had a stress-induced cardiac episode. Your blood pressure was dangerously high." The next morning, a different doctor appeared, one I didn't recognize. He pulled up a chair beside my bed, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Mrs. Stone, I need to tell you something important. Your daughter came by earlier with legal documents. She tried to sign consent forms to move you into long-term care, claiming you're mentally incompetent." My blood turned to ice. "What?" "Legally, she has no authority to make those decisions, but she was very insistent. She seemed surprised when I refused to acknowledge her signatures." He leaned closer. "Be very careful, Mrs. Stone. Someone is trying to control your life." As I lay in that hospital bed, machines beeping around me, I realized the truth. Melissa hadn't just stolen my money. She was systematically erasing my independence, my autonomy, my very existence. First, the wedding humiliation to isolate me from family events. Then the house grab to control my shelter. Now the financial theft to eliminate my options. And finally, the attempted medical override to warehouse me away forever. She had orchestrated my destruction with the precision of a legal mind and the heartlessness of a stranger. But lying there, with needles in my arms and monitors tracking my vital signs, something shifted inside me. For 67 years, I had bent and bowed and sacrificed and surrendered. Not anymore. Imagine waking up to find your own child stole your future. Type stolen if this makes your heart ache. They kept me in the hospital for 3 days. 3 days to process the magnitude of my daughter's betrayal, and 3 days to feel something I hadn't experienced in decades. Pure, righteous anger. On the third morning, as I sat by the window watching the sun rise over the city Melissa now owned a piece of, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be her victim anymore. The social worker assigned to my case was a kind woman named Rosa, who'd seen too many family betrayals in her 20-year career. She sat beside my bed with genuine concern in her eyes. "Mrs. Stone, I've reviewed your situation. What your daughter did with your bank account is legally questionable, even with authorized access, and her attempt to sign medical consent forms without power of attorney is completely inappropriate. What can I do about it?" Rosa leaned forward. "You can fight, but it won't be easy. She's a lawyer with resources and connections. You'll need evidence, documentation, and a strong legal team." "I don't have money for lawyers." She made sure of that. "There are legal aid services for seniors. And Mrs. Stone?" Rosa's voice softened. "Sometimes the best evidence comes from people who underestimate you." That afternoon I was discharged with more than just medication. I left with purpose. My first stop was the bank. I requested copies of every transaction from the past 3 years, every withdrawal, every authorization, every electronic signature. The bank manager, who'd known me for 15 years, looked uncomfortable as he printed the records. "Mrs. Stone, I have to tell you, some of these signatures don't look like your usual handwriting." Bingo. Forgery was a felony, even between family members. My second stop was the courthouse. In the public records office, I researched everything: property transfers, legal filings, anything with Melissa's name on it. What I found made my blood boil. She'd already filed preliminary paperwork to challenge my mental competency. Forms dated from before my hospital visit, before she'd emptied my account. She'd been planning this systematic destruction for months. But Melissa had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated me. For 43 years, I'd been a seamstress. My job required precision, attention to detail, and meticulous record-keeping. Every alteration needed documentation. Every measurement had to be exact. Every customer's preferences were filed away for future reference. Those skills didn't disappear when I retired. They'd just been waiting for the right project. That evening, I transformed my dining room into a battlefield. I spread out every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence I'd collected over the years. Bank statements going back decades, receipts for Melissa's education, clothes, emergencies, proof of every sacrifice I'd made. But most importantly, I had something Melissa didn't know about: my husband's lockbox. For 30 years, it had sat unopened in my bedroom closet. After he died, I couldn't bear to look inside. But now, with shaking hands, I lifted the metal box onto my table and turned the small key I'd kept hidden in my jewellery box. Inside, along with his military medals and our marriage certificate, was his will. Not the copy I'd shown everyone, the original, with raised seals and notarized signatures, and in that will was a clause I'd forgotten about. Any attempt to defraud or manipulate his widow would result in immediate forfeiture of inheritance rights for his descendants. My husband had been a careful man. He'd seen what money could do to families, and he'd built protections into his estate planning that I'd never fully understood, until now. I called Rosa the next morning. "I'm ready to fight." "Are you sure, Mrs. Stone? This will get ugly. Your daughter won't go down without using every weapon in her arsenal. I looked around my modest home, the place I'd worked 16-hour days to afford, the sanctuary she wanted to steal from me. On my mantel sat a photo of Melissa's graduation, both of us smiling, my arm around her shoulders. That woman in the photo had loved unconditionally and given without limits. She'd believed that sacrifice was love and that love was enough. But love without respect is slavery, and I was done being enslaved by my own generosity. I'm sure. It's time my daughter learned that underestimating people has consequences. That night, I sat at my sewing machine for the first time in months. Not to mend someone else's clothes, but to alter my own life. As the needle moved through fabric, I thought about all the wedding dresses I'd sewn, all the alterations that had transformed ill-fitting garments into perfect fits. Now it was my turn for alterations. Time to take in what was too loose, let out what was too tight, and create something that actually fit the woman I was becoming. The war was about to begin, and this time I wasn't fighting for someone else's dreams. I was fighting for my own survival. The next 6 weeks became the most focused period of my entire life. Every morning at 7 a.m. I sat at my dining room table with coffee and determination, building the case that would either save my life or destroy it completely. I started with the bank records. 43 years of deposits and withdrawals, meticulously categorized. Every sacrifice I'd made for Melissa was there in black and white. Tuition payments, book fees, emergency loans that were never repaid. The pattern was damning. For decades, money flowed only one direction, from my account to hers. Even after she graduated and started earning a lawyer's salary, the withdrawals continued. Car insurance, apartment deposits, designer clothes for job interviews, and then came the recent activity. The systematic emptying of my account showed clear intent. Small withdrawals at first, $500 here, $800 there, building to massive transfers once she realized I wouldn't sign over my house. But the smoking gun came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen from the Chinese restaurant where I sometimes treated myself to dinner had always liked me. When I explained my situation, her eyes flashed with anger. That girl always acted like she was too good for you. When she came in with her fancy husband, she made you wait outside in the car like a servant. She brought you here. 3 months ago, big celebration dinner after some business meeting. She got drunk on expensive wine and made phone calls right at the table. Mrs. Chen leaned closer. I have security cameras, Mrs. Stone, and very good hearing. That security footage became evidence exhibit A. The recording showed Melissa, clearly intoxicated, making a phone call from her restaurant booth. Mrs. Chen had enhanced the audio, and Melissa's voice came through crystal clear. Richard, stop worrying. The old woman will never know. By the time she figures out the money's gone, she'll be in assisted living and it won't matter. No, she's too stupid to check her statements regularly. Trust me, I've been managing her finances for years. She's completely dependent on me now. The contempt in her voice was breathtaking. My own daughter, drunk on wine I'd indirectly paid for, bragging about stealing from me. But the recording contained something even more valuable: specific dates and amounts. She'd planned the thefts in advance, strategically timing them to avoid detection. This wasn't impulsive greed, it was calculated fraud. Armed with this evidence, I contacted legal aid services for seniors. My assigned attorney was a young man named Thomas Rivera who specialized in elder financial abuse. Mrs. Stone, this is one of the strongest cases I've seen. Your daughter made 3 critical mistakes: leaving a paper trail, underestimating your record-keeping abilities, and getting caught on camera discussing her crimes. What happens now? We file charges, both civil and criminal. Financial elder abuse, forgery, attempted guardianship fraud, and conspiracy. If convicted, she could face prison time and be required to pay back everything with interest. The weight of it hit me. I was about to destroy my daughter's legal career, her marriage prospects, her entire future. For a moment, the old Margaret, the mother who would sacrifice anything, almost wavered. Then I remembered her voice on that recording. too stupid to check her statements. That woman deserved whatever justice brought her. But Thomas warned me about what was coming. She's going to fight dirty. Expect character assassination, claims about your mental state, attempts to paint you as a vindictive old woman. Are you prepared for that? I thought about 43 years of being underestimated, of being seen as weak and disposable. My whole life people had looked at me and seen someone who wouldn't fight back. Let her try. We filed the paperwork on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Melissa, Richard, their lawyer Caldwell, all demanding I drop the charges immediately. The most revealing call came from Richard himself. "Margaret, you're making a huge mistake. Do you have any idea what kind of connections the Morrison family has in this town? Judges, prosecutors, city council members, we know everyone. Drop this foolishness now and we might let you visit your daughter in prison." Prison? Oh yes. Did you think we'd just roll over? We're filing counter-charges. Elder abuse requires a competent victim, and we have medical experts ready to testify that you're mentally declining. You'll be declared incompetent, and everything you think you own will go into conservatorship. Guess who the conservator will be? The threat was clear. Back down or lose everything. That night, I sat in my kitchen holding the original copy of my husband's will, the document that could destroy all of Melissa's plans. The inheritance clause was ironclad. Any descendant who attempted to defraud the estate would forfeit all rights permanently. But using it would mean cutting Melissa off completely. No inheritance, no family connection, no possibility of reconciliation ever. For 43 years, I'd chosen love over justice, hope over reality, sacrifice over self-preservation. Not anymore. I called Thomas. File the inheritance challenge too. She forfeited her rights the moment she stole from me. Are you sure? There's no going back from this. I looked around my kitchen, at the table where she'd done homework while I worked late into the night, at the refrigerator still covered with her childhood artwork, at the phone that would probably never ring again with her voice calling me Mum. She made her choice when she decided I was too stupid to fight back. The next morning, I visited my husband's grave for the first time since Melissa's childhood. I knelt beside his headstone and whispered the words I should have said years ago. I'm finally ready to stop being everyone's victim. The paper trail was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The legal team was in place. Now came the hardest part, facing my daughter in court and watching her realize that the woman she'd underestimated her entire life was about to teach her the most expensive lesson of her career. Sometimes, the truth is buried in old papers and broken promises. Share if you believe justice always finds a way. The day of the hearing arrived with an October chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I sat in my car outside the courthouse at 7 a.m., 2 hours before proceedings were scheduled to begin, staring up at the granite columns that would either vindicate me or destroy me completely. Thomas had warned me what to expect. They'll come in with an army. Expensive suits, briefcases full of psychological evaluations, character witnesses ready to testify that you're unstable. They'll try to overwhelm the judge with paperwork and intimidation. He was right. At 8:30, a black Mercedes pulled up to the courthouse steps. Melissa emerged wearing a navy power suit that probably cost more than my monthly social security check. Behind her came Richard in his signature charcoal grey, followed by attorney Caldwell and 2 associates I didn't recognise. But it was the woman walking behind them that made my blood freeze. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, a prominent psychiatrist who specialised in elder competency evaluations. Melissa had brought a mental health expert to declare me incompetent. They swept up the courthouse steps like a dark wave, briefcases gleaming, shoes clicking against marble with military precision. Not one of them looked in my direction. Thomas appeared at my car window. Ready. As I'll ever be. Remember, they're going to try to rattle you. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and trust the evidence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with dark wood panelling and windows that let in pale autumn light. Judge Patricia Hendricks took her seat behind the bench. a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and greying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Melissa's legal team arranged themselves at the plaintiff's table like a military formation. Documents were stacked in perfect piles, laptops opened with synchronized efficiency, and every movement choreographed to project power and competence. At our table, it was just Thomas, myself, and a single manila folder containing the truth. Judge Hendricks called the court to order. This is a complex case involving allegations of elder financial abuse, forgery, and inheritance disputes. I've reviewed the preliminary filings from both sides, and frankly, these are serious charges that could result in criminal referrals. Mr. Caldwell, please begin. Caldwell stood with theatrical gravity. Your Honour, we're here today because of a tragic family situation. Margaret Stone, once a loving mother, has become increasingly paranoid and vindictive in her advanced age. She's filed these baseless accusations against her own daughter, a respected attorney, in what appears to be a desperate attempt for attention and control. He gestured toward his team's impressive display. We have medical evaluations, psychological assessments, and testimony from multiple witnesses who can attest to Mrs. Stone's declining mental state. Her accusations of theft are simply the delusions of a woman who can no longer manage her own affairs. As he spoke, I watched Melissa. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, the picture of wounded innocence. But I caught something in her eyes when she looked at me. Not sadness or concern, but cold calculation. She was already planning her victory speech. Caldwell continued for 20 minutes, painting me as a mentally declining burden who'd fabricated these charges out of spite and confusion. He presented bank statements showing Melissa as an authorized user, character references from her law firm, and Dr. Hawthorne's preliminary assessment suggesting cognitive decline. When he finished, Judge Hendricks turned to Thomas. Mr. Rivera? Thomas stood slowly, deliberately. Your Honour, my client didn't bring psychological evaluations or character witnesses today. She brought something much more powerful. The truth. He opened our single manila folder and pulled out the restaurant security footage. I'd like to begin with Exhibit A, a recording of Ms. Morrison discussing her crimes. The courtroom fell silent as Mrs. Chen's security footage played on the judge's monitor. Melissa's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. The old woman will never know. She's too stupid to check her statements regularly. Trust me, I've been managing her finances for years. I watched Melissa's face drain of colour. Richard leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, but she seemed frozen, staring at the screen showing her own mouth speaking those damning words. As you can hear, Your Honour, this wasn't confused accusations from a declining mind. This was calculated theft, planned and executed with full awareness of the victim's vulnerability. Thomas continued methodically. The forged signatures on bank withdrawals, the systematic timing of thefts, the attempted medical consent forms signed without authority. But the moment that shattered their defence came when Thomas produced my husband's original will. Your Honour, this document contains a specific clause regarding inheritance forfeiture in cases of fraud against the surviving spouse. Ms. Morrison's actions don't just constitute theft, they void her inheritance rights entirely. Caldwell shot to his feet. Objection. That document hasn't been properly authenticated. It has been, Your Honour. Thomas smiled. Notarized, witnessed and confirmed by the original law firm that drafted it 30 years ago. Morrison Associates, actually. The same firm where Ms. Morrison works. The irony hung in the air like smoke. Melissa had been working at the very firm that held the legal instrument of her own destruction. Judge Hendricks studied the will carefully. Mr. Caldwell, were you aware of this inheritance clause when you advised your client to pursue guardianship? That is, the document was thought to be a standard will without unusual provisions. So you didn't read it thoroughly before advising your client to potentially violate its terms. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Judge Hendricks turned to Melissa. Ms. Morrison, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you make the statements heard on this recording? For the first time, Melissa spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Those statements were taken out of context. What context makes too stupid to check her statements acceptable when referring to your mother? Melissa's composure finally cracked. She never appreciated anything I did. 40 years of sacrifice, she said. But she chose to sacrifice. Nobody forced her to work 3 jobs or sell her jewelry. She made herself a martyr, and then expected me to worship her for it. The outburst filled the courtroom with shocked silence. Even her own legal team looked horrified. So you felt entitled to her life savings because you disagreed with her parenting choices. I felt entitled to financial security. She was sitting on $40,000 while living like a pauper. That money was doing nothing but gathering dust while I was building a career, a future. A future built on stolen money, Judge Hendricks interrupted. The judge studied her notes for several long minutes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I've seen many family financial disputes, but rarely one with such clear evidence of premeditation and contempt for the victim. Ms. Morrison, your own words convict you more thoroughly than any witness testimony could. She turned to face the courtroom. I find Margaret Stone to be completely competent and credible. Her evidence is overwhelming and her accusations are substantiated. Ms. Morrison, you will immediately return all stolen funds with interest calculated at the statutory rate. You are hereby removed from all accounts, properties, and medical decision-making regarding your mother. Additionally, based on the inheritance clause violation, you forfeit all rights to your mother's estate. The gavel came down with the sound of finality. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney for Criminal Prosecution. Ms. Morrison, you may also face disciplinary action from the State Bar Association. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Melissa sat frozen, her world crashing around her in real time. Richard was already on his phone, probably calling damage control specialists. As we gathered our papers to leave, Melissa finally looked directly at me. For just a moment, I saw a flash of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But that little girl was gone. In her place sat a woman who had gambled everything on her mother's weakness, and lost. Walking down those courthouse steps, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the satisfaction of being underestimated by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. 6 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking the harbour, watching sailboats drift across water that sparkled like scattered diamonds. The apartment was smaller than my old house, but it was mine, truly mine, in a way that felt completely different from anything I'd owned before. The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. Melissa was forced to return the full $42,000 plus interest, bringing the total to $47,300. The State Bar Association suspended her license pending a full investigation. Her marriage to Richard dissolved within weeks. Apparently, his family didn't appreciate the scandal or the criminal charges. I'd used part of the returned money to hire a moving company and find this seaside apartment. The rest went into a new account at a different bank, one where I was the sole signatory and always would be. But the most valuable thing I'd gained wasn't financial. It was the community I'd never known I was missing. Every Tuesday, I met with the Harbour View Book Club, a group of 12 women ranging from their 60s to their 80s. We'd all survived different versions of family betrayal, daughters who stole, sons who abandoned, spouses who deceived. There was Rosa, whose son had sold her house while she was recovering from surgery. Patricia, whose daughter-in-law had emptied her retirement account. Linda, whose grandson had forged her signature on credit card applications. We were survivors, warriors who'd learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. The hardest part, Patricia said during one of our meetings, is that everyone expects you to forgive them because they're family. Family doesn't steal from you, Rosa replied firmly. Thieves steal from you. The fact that they share your DNA doesn't change what they are. I'd found my tribe at 67 years old. Last month I'd done something I'd never imagined possible. I'd taken a cruise to Alaska. For 7 days, I watched glaciers carve into pristine waters, ate meals I didn't have to cook, and slept in a bed I didn't have to make. I'd spent money on myself without calculating the cost in someone else's sacrifices. On the ship, I met a widower named Frank who taught me to play shuffleboard and shared stories about his late wife. Nothing romantic, we were both too set in our ways for that, but friendship felt like a luxury I'd forgotten existed. "You seem different," he'd said on our last day. "Like you just figured out something important." He was right. I'd figured out that love without respect is slavery, and I'd spent 43 years as a volunteer slave to my own good intentions. The phone call I'd been expecting finally came on a rainy Thursday in March. "Mrs. Stone? This is Dr. Martinez from County General. Your daughter has been in an accident." For a split second, the old Margaret almost surfaced, the mother who would drop everything and run to fix whatever needed fixing. Instead, I asked, "Is she going to live?" "Yes, ma'am. She has some broken bones and a concussion, but she'll recover fully. She's asking for you." "I see. Does she have insurance?" "Well, yes, but then she'll be fine. Please tell her I hope she heals quickly." I hung up before the doctor could respond. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Melissa herself calling from her hospital bed. "Mum?" Her voice was small, scared, nothing like the confident attorney who'd stolen from me. "Hello, Melissa. I'm hurt. I need you." For 43 years, those 4 words had been my call to action. Now they felt like echoes from a previous life. "I'm sure the hospital staff will take excellent care of you." "Mum, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked out at my harbour view, at the sailboats carrying people toward their own horizons. Being my daughter meant something when you were 6 years old and scared of thunderstorms. It meant something when you graduated law school and I was so proud I cried. But it stopped meaning something the day you decided I was too stupid to notice you stealing from me. I was desperate. You were greedy. There's a difference. The silence stretched between us like a canyon too wide to cross. "If you change your mind," she started. "I won't." I hung up and turned off my phone. That evening at book club, I shared what had happened. The women listened without judgment, understanding written on faces that had lived through their own betrayals. "Do you think you'll regret it?" Linda asked. I considered the question seriously. Would I regret not running to Melissa's bedside? Would I regret not offering her another chance to disappoint me? "I regret 43 years of mistaking enabling for love," I said finally. "I regret teaching her that my needs didn't matter. I regret showing her that I would accept any treatment as long as she occasionally called me Mom." I looked around at these women who'd become my chosen family. But I don't regret choosing myself for once. I don't regret learning that self-respect is more valuable than false hope. The moral of my story isn't complicated. Love without respect is slavery. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. And sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who know you'll always forgive them, until the day you don't. I'm 77 now, living in a world that's smaller but entirely mine. I paint watercolours on Tuesday afternoons, volunteer at the literacy centre on Thursdays, and travel whenever the mood strikes me. My daughter sends a card every Mother's Day, always signed "Love, Melissa," as if love were just a closing salutation rather than a living, breathing thing that requires care and respect to survive. I read the cards, acknowledge her effort, and file them away with all the other documents from my previous life. Because I learned something important at 67. It's never too late to stop being someone else's victim and start being your own hero. Tell me, if your own child betrayed you this way, would you forgive or fight back? Your answer might surprise you.